How you guys doing? Man, second service has been like a little bit down lately. Anybody notice that? The first service has been like, first service used to be the one that was kind of down. Anyways, hey, so what do you guys think about like a 20-minute sermon this morning? That good? Hey, you guys didn't get as excited about that as first service. Yeah, so thank you for that. Yeah. No, they were like way too excited about that fact when I said that. People clapped, but anyways, 20 minutes. That doesn't mean that we're getting out any earlier, probably later, in fact, but I've got a lot of stuff I have to cover this morning, so I'll only be preaching for about 20 minutes this morning, and then the rest. All right, but we got to jump right in. So I'm going to put a date up on the screen, and you tell me, why is that date like super significant? Anybody? Where were you? 6/19/2012. That's kind of not a fair question, so I won't let it linger too long, because it's really not a fair question, because it's significant to me. And so if you weren't friends with me, like on Facebook or something like that, you probably wouldn't know why this date is significant. But I did something that day that I never do, and that's I posted on Facebook. Right? Like not just once, right? Who's my fellow creepers out there just creeping in the shadows? Anybody lurking around out there? Yeah, I got a couple. Yeah. I don't post anything, man, but I see you guys, right? I see y'all, the stuff you do. But anyways, so I posted twice. Now I know that's like some of y'all before breakfast, but I posted two things. Here's the first thing I posted. Yeah, right? No, it's awesome. Apparently, I had forgot how to hold a baby bottle since Jack, but that is the birth of my daughter, Charlotte Ann Wood. And that was like a super big, significant event in my life. That something so significant, it would cause me to do something that I never do, which is post on Facebook, right? Like nobody had to tell me to put that picture up. Here's the other one. Yeah, there we go. Isn't that awesome? Right? I really just wanted a chance to share those pictures with you. But that was a day, like in dads, you know, like your son is awesome, but there's just something about that little girl, right? And it changes you. In fact, the previous picture where I'm sitting there feeding her, you're watching something go around in my mind. It's like I am figuring out that I could harm another human being if I needed to, right? Like if I needed to, like really badly, I could do that. And that was like some things were clicking about that in that picture. It's like if anybody ever hurt this little girl, right? But what is that? We would call that moment a watershed moment. Anybody familiar with that terminology? Watershed moment. Here's kind of the definition I found. It's a turning point. It's the exact moment that changes the direction of an activity, a situation, or even a life. Watershed moment is a dividing point. So if you know what a watershed is, it's two bodies of water separated, and they would call the land in between those a watershed. Now, water on both sides moves in different directions, and so the watershed is the point of change, right? It's a moment, it's a dividing point from which things will never be the same. And we talk about our watershed moments. Nobody has to force our hand. Nobody had to force my hand to put those pictures up of that beautiful little girl on Facebook. Even though I hate posting. You know, it's funny, planting this church and like I'm supposed to be actively engaged in social media, I guess, but I hate it and it's the worst. And yet on that day, I willingly was ready to proclaim from the rooftops because of this watershed moment. So some of you may not have kids or whatever, so maybe that example doesn't resonate, but let me give you one that I know will resonate with everyone to some degree, and it's another picture. Yeah. So, to me, it's not that isn't important, right? Like, it's not that what that stands for isn't a big deal and that I don't realize that, because I absolutely do. But I don't have that symbol of like cancer awareness, or, you know, they have different colors that mean different things, but I couldn't tell you what those colors were outside of, I think that one's breast cancer awareness maybe. But I don't have that on the back of my car. I don't have a bumper sticker of that. Maybe some of you do. Maybe some of you even have that as like have that on a t-shirt or a bracelet. Like some of you, that symbol really means something significant. And it isn't that it doesn't mean something significant to me, but it just doesn't mean what it means to you. So much so that you're willing to put that symbol on you or out in front of you. Right? You had a watershed moment with cancer. Maybe it was your own or someone you loved surviving and beating the battle, like winning the fight against cancer. Maybe it was a watershed moment in the other direction that left you scarred and broken because of it. Maybe you lost someone you love because of this. And so either way, this takes on new meaning for us. Now, why did I bring that up? Why do I talk about that? Well, we'll get to that. We're in our series, 2020. Vision series here at Sunbreak. We've been talking about some of the new ground that we're going to be breaking, some of the new areas that we're kind of going into, that we want to kind of engage our community well this upcoming year. We're about the Great Commission this year. And so for the last few weeks, we have been sharing a lot about what that's going to look like. And I actually had the opportunity to share the lion's share of what that's going to be this year. And that is in our topic that we're talking about today. So last week, we talked about to love God with all of our heart is worship. Anybody remember that, right? Pastor Robbie, he actually went to Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, and he talked about this living sacrifice, that we present ourselves as a living sacrifice to God. And I love what Rick Warren has to say about that. He said the problem with a living sacrifice is it keeps trying to climb off the altar, right? And so every day that struggle of putting our lives back up on the altar, that we would submit everything that we do, the way that we perceive the world around us, the way that we speak about Jesus, and everything that, every aspect of our life is now radically shaded and shaped by who Jesus is and what he has done in us. And that is worship. It's so much more and goes so far beyond the verbal proclamation of who Jesus is and a recognition of his worthship here on Sunday mornings. It extends into what we do on Monday mornings and Monday afternoons and Saturday nights and whatever that is. As your life takes on this posture of submission to Jesus, that as you make these new choices in the way that you perceive the world, that is worship. As long as we are allowing those things to be shaped by Jesus, by the gospel, right? This week, we're going to be talking about evangelism. Now, the second I said that, the second you saw that word flash on the screen, there's probably 30, 40 people in here this morning. There was probably that many different definitions or thoughts about what evangelism actually is. If I were to go down the line and ask people, don't worry, I'm not. Some of you instantly got terrified. But if I were to go down the line and ask you what is evangelism, and I was to or we could sit across from a table from one another, I would probably have as many different definitions as there are people. Now, they would center around some common facts, but what that looks like, it would be radically different. So I want to do some work around this idea of evangelism this morning before we talk about how we're going to do that as a church. So I told you, 20-minute sermon. That's why I'm going a little faster than normal this morning. 20-minute sermon because I want to reshape our conversation around what evangelism is. And then I want to give you some ways in which we are going to engage our community and the world on this mission of evangelism. Sound good? Good? Cool. All right. So the place that we went to take our initiative, that we take our mission from, is the Great Commission, Matthew chapter 28, 18 through 20. And part of that says to go into all the world and make disciples. That action of making disciples is evangelism. Now, this is why I talked about the watershed moment. Here's why. The ideal. This is the ideal of evangelism. That we would gladly and without compulsion proclaim the good news of Jesus out of an overflow of joy from a changed life and a new eternal destiny. You have had a watershed. If you are following Jesus, if Jesus has saved you, you have had a watershed moment with Jesus in which Jesus has intersected your life, and after that intersection, you are now no longer the same. Now, I've heard some of your stories, and some of you come from backgrounds of addiction or abuse, and so that change has been radical, and the victory and what He has pulled you out of has been amazing. And it isn't just about our eternal destiny, right? That's enough to push us out into the world, right? The reality that hell is very real, and that there will be people that go there if they don't know Jesus, right? If they aren't following Jesus, that should be enough to push us out there. But it's so much more. Jesus has transformed every aspect of our life, and that is amazing. That is good, right? And we can't help ourselves but talk about these good watershed moments. Everybody agree? Like it's just a natural, auto response to things that are life-changing, that have completely changed the direction of our life. And here, we even see this idea played out in Scripture. Now, I literally picked this example at random from a dozen or so examples of this in the Bible, but it always amazed me that Jesus would heal somebody, bring somebody back from the dead, do some form of a miracle, and then afterwards he would tell everyone who witnessed it to not tell anybody. Does that make sense? No, that doesn't matter. If you're here and you know your ministry is only going to be 3.5 years long, you would want to get the word out to as many people as possible. So at any point telling people to not talk about the fact that they just witnessed you do a miracle, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But Jesus does that, and that's a whole other sermon for another reason. So I hope it didn't pique your interest too much in that. But he does. And yet people ignore him completely. And here's one example of that. He says, then he touched their eyes. Jesus had run into these two blind men that had asked Jesus if he was willing to heal them. And he says, yes, I am. And he says, then he touched their eyes, saying, it shall be done according to your faith. And their eyes were opened. And Jesus sternly warned them, see that no one knows about this. Let's just stop for just a second. You are one of these two guys that were just healed, right? You've never seen anything in your life, and now you open your eyes for the first time, and the first person you see is Jesus. And after you finish hugging his neck, man, and falling at his feet, he stands you up and he says, don't tell anybody about this. I am serious. And then you go to defy the very person that did this. And but they went out and spread the news about him throughout all that land. It's hard for me to grasp, what would cause somebody to disobey Jesus who just healed you. But it's they're compelled to do so. There's this compulsory act of them going out and telling Jesus. They just couldn't help themselves. Who are my loose lips people, right? You can raise your hand. It's okay. I actually had 3 people raise their hand in the first service, man. I applaud their honesty. That was great. There are just some people that something good happens and you cannot wait to tell people about it, right? I am one of those people. If there's something awesome happening in our life, I cannot wait to tell people about it. I don't have to have anybody twist my arm to tell people about something good, just like these guys didn't. The Apostle Paul, he has a similar response around sharing the good news. He says, for if I preach the gospel, I have nothing to boast of, for I am under compulsion. For woe is me if I do not preach the gospel. The idea behind this, it carries with it Paul has a spring that is bubbling up out of him that he cannot control. Woe is me, I will burst if I can't get this out of me. He talks about it in the same way that the Old Testament prophets would, that they would have this prophecy come from God, and it was like hearing a songwriter or a poet talk about it. Have you ever heard that? I had this thing in me, and I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep until I got it out on the page, right? And I wrote it down, I wrote my song, and they just couldn't help themselves. Paul was compelled to talk about this, and this is the evangelism ideal. Kevin DeYoung says, we are all natural evangelists for the people and the things that we love. All right, so if this is the ideal, how are we doing? So I know that the longer I talked, I could see it on your faces. The longer I talked, the more estranged from that definition of the ideal everyone in this room became. I'm going to be honest with you about me for just a second. And so if I'm honest with you about me, then I need you to be honest with you about you, right? That's not me. Is anybody else? That's not how I go about sharing the gospel. I don't wake up every single day chomping at the bits, excited for whoever I get to run into that day so I can share the good news of Jesus with them. I'm a pastor, man, so maybe that's a problem. I don't know, But I just want to be real with you that I don't think it's your experience either. I think that's the truth behind it is there. I think the truth that Jesus is good and that he is worth your life and he's so much better than anything this world has to offer. And what he has saved you from is very compelling. And I think it is the underlying ideal thing and motivator that pushes us out to do evangelism, to go into all the world and make disciples. But if I rely on that feeling, right? Like if I rely on that giddy feeling of something so good, like that picture of my daughter that I showed, right? Like that's disconnected from reality. Because I told you, I don't post pictures of her every day, right? Does that mean that I don't love her? Does that mean that I'm not like super ready to like just sing her praises and tell people about her and just like I'm so proud of her? No, I love her very much. But I think the question is, have we lost the joy that drives us into evangelism? Have we lost that joy? Is that what the problem is? If we're not meeting that ideal, have we lost the joy that drives us into evangelism? And I don't think so. Because like I said, I don't post pictures about my daughter every single day, right? But that doesn't mean that I don't love her deeply. That doesn't mean that I'm not, like if you wanted to stop and talk to me about her, that I wouldn't be willing to like talk your ear off about her. Like I love her very, very much. I have a friend, God knows his name's David Nasser, and David used to be an evangelist in the South. And he tells a story about the night that he got saved. David was Iranian and had a really just crazy upbringing. His story is amazing. But he got saved at a youth group event one night. And on the way home, his youth pastor was driving him home. And the youth pastor, he told him, was like, hey, can we stop at McDonald's real quick? The youth pastor didn't even ask any questions. He just kind of stopped, figured, oh, he either wants something to eat or he's going to go to the bathroom. David tells the story. He goes through the McDonald's and he goes out the other side. He'd just been saved that night. He goes through the McDonald's all the way through and out the second set of doors, and he's standing at the drive-thru, like just past the drive-thru window, preaching at people as they leave the drive-thru. That's crazy, man, right? Like that's not normal. That's not what we do. And when we think of evangelism, that's wild, right? He had that joy. He had that new excitement about it. But here's the deal. I don't think that that's meant to carry us on day to day to day. I don't think that that's meant to be what carries us on towards the task of evangelism, this great commission that we have from Jesus to go into all the world and make disciples. It isn't that sort of excitement. I think that is the underlying ideal still, right? Are we tracking what I mean when I say that? But that isn't that level of excitement that pushes us outwards. Here's what I think it is. I think this is the issue with why we don't engage in evangelism. Is I think we have allowed an inaccurate view of what evangelism is to preclude our participation in it. I think we have an inaccurate view of what evangelism actually is. I have another friend, his name's Ed Newton. I met Ed on the speaking circuit down south. He's big time. When you think of evangelist, he's the guy. Slick back hair, like he's got half the New Testament memorized, and dude can bring the fire, man. He can preach, right? Ed's also one of those guys. He tells a story in one of his sermons. I'm stealing this, and he goes into a Burger King, and he sees this girl crying in the booth. And Ed is just that type of guy. It's just how he's wired that he sat down with the girl at Burger King in the booth crying, and before he finished his meal, he had led her to Jesus, man. Like he had prayed with her and like she had accepted Christ in Burger King. And then Ed like flies the coop, man. He's like done his thing and he's on his way. Now when you think of evangelism, right? Like, oftentimes, that's how I think of evangelism. That person who's willing to, like, share the gospel in such a way that we can bring people from death into life, like, walk with them through that journey into faith. Either it's the professional guy with the slick back hair that can preach it, right, bring the fire, or it's that person who can go into Burger King and sit down and lead somebody to Jesus. And if both of those are our only view of what evangelism is, we have a very narrow-minded view of what evangelism actually is. And it's no wonder, right? Because who else does that terrify, thinking about doing that, right? Like, it terrifies me, man. And I don't think that there's many questions that I could run into at that booth at Burger King that I wouldn't be able to like talk through and answer all right. And the thought of it still is scary. And so for some of you, that is enough to preclude your participation in evangelism. If you think that's what evangelism is, then that can preclude you from it. I want to maybe give you a better view or a more holistic whole view of what evangelism is. You guys good with that? Cool. 1 Corinthians chapter 3. Paul had been correcting an error in a church. They had been kind of clinging to these celebrity pastors, Apollos or Paul or Peter, and Paul writes to them to correct this issue that you weren't saved by Peter or Apollos or Paul, like who you got baptized. None of that matters. Like, we are servants of Christ, right? And here's what he says. He says, "What then is Apollos? And what is Paul? Servants through whom you believed, even as the Lord gave opportunity to each one. I planted, Apollos watered, but God was causing the growth." This is a process, and both Apollos and Paul had a hand in that process. Like, people's journey of faith isn't that you bump into them at the grocery store one day and they've never even heard the name of Jesus and they don't know what Christianity is, and then in one conversation you're able to convert them, right? And they like get saved in the grocery store line. That is not, and I think we know that. I'm obviously being a little hyperbolic in my statement here, but like, we know that that's not how it works, and yet that's the image of evangelism, if we're not really careful, that we set up in our mind. Is that people have been on a long faith journey, that God may have been working on them for years. That some people have come along and planted seeds, some people have come along and nurtured the soil or watered. Like, it is a long process. Paul's saying that it isn't me and it isn't Apollos, it's ultimately God. We just had hands in it throughout the way. So then neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything, but God who causes the growth. Now he who plants and he who waters are one, but each will receive his own reward according to his own labor. Again, there's this division of labor in this process, that it isn't just one person that is laboring in the fields. For we are God's fellow workers. You are God's field, God's building. I'll show you guys something I know, like, it's super hard to read, all right? So it's one of those, you build the slide and then you put it up here and find out that it's terrible. So this is what's known as the Ingalls scale of evangelism. And this is really super helpful. So if it's something that any of you guys want or would like a copy of, I'd love to give it to you, because I hope this will really help you wrap your mind around how evangelism actually works. That it is a journey. It is a step-by-step process. And it starts with -10. It actually goes further back than that. -10 is an awareness of the supernatural. But some scales have it going back to like -20, right? Like militant atheists or something like that. Like it can go way, way far back to people who are not just like unfamiliar with like spirituality, but completely hostile towards it. But as you move up the scale towards that 0 mark, you see a change begin to happen. So -9 is no effective knowledge of Christianity. -8 is the initial awareness of Christianity. Then it's an interest in Christianity, awareness of the basic facts of the gospel, a grasp of the implications of the gospel. Do you see how we're moving step by step here? Then it's a positive attitude towards the gospel. An awareness of a personal need, a challenge and a decision to act, and then repentance and faith, and then a disciple is born. And if our picture of evangelism only has 3 numbers on this, -10, 0, and 10, then we have an inaccurate view of what evangelism is. Because God walks people through a process that may take years, decades even. And you don't know where you're going to intersect somebody on that scale. So let me go back to the story about my buddy Ed. Ed, unlike some evangelists who will do that, Ed actually does the good, hard work of going back and following up with that person. And the rest of the story that Ed probably won't tell on any given sermon is that Ed just happened to be there at the right time. The right time, right place at the right time. The reality is this girl at Burger King had a friend, a Christian friend, that had been living her faith very visibly and verbally for 6 years prior to this. She had had a relationship with a girl that had been very outspoken about her faith. Not pushy, not trying to shove the Jesus pill down her throat, but like sincerely, genuinely lived out her faith in front of someone who didn't believe in Jesus. She shared it from time to time, but this girl had put her off so many times before. I'm not interested. But a couple of months before she ran into Ed, she had watched this girl go through a significant personal tragedy, some serious personal loss. And the way she handled it, like it solidified. It moved her from -4 on the scale to like 1 on the scale. Like, I know I need the gospel. Like, this is real. I've seen the realness of it lived out in somebody's life. And Ed said, but because she had put off that girl so many times in the past, she wasn't willing to enter into that conversation and pray that prayer, like walk through that process of salvation with her. But Ed, like God sovereignly provided Ed. Ed is just wired that way. And it just seems like people that are wired that way just have these encounters that are almost like, I don't know, just unnatural. I don't know, like that's not normal. I don't see people crying at booths at Burger King. And if I do, a lot of times I'm kind of doing that number, right? Like, but not Ed. Ed, like, come to find out this girl was standing on the 0 point, just ready to walk, and needed someone to help her step across that, and God provided Ed. And so I don't want to downplay that view. That's why I said it's not a wrong view of evangelism. It's just an incomplete view of evangelism. Because that moment, that 0 point moment on the scale, is a very small, very finite moment. And the amount of people who are wired to do that and to walk with people through that moment are a pretty small number of people. But if we have set that up as the goal, then no wonder so many people aren't participating in evangelism. But I think that everyone can engage people who don't know Jesus. And it's not the glamorous work. And that girl, her friend, didn't do the glamorous work in the booth there at Burger King. She did the hard work, day after day, having meals with this girl. Like displaying her faith when it wasn't convenient and it was hard to do. Like having conversations with her that may have been uncomfortable at the time. Like you name it. Over 6 years, there had been a number of things that had transpired that were difficult, but were nonetheless still evangelism. And I believe that God has wired everyone in this room, if you are following Jesus, to do that in some form or fashion. That He has a place, just like He had a place for Ed, right? He has a place for you. And you are called, you are commissioned. You realize that if you are following Jesus, the only reason that you, you're still drawing breath is because He has a purpose for you here. Do you ever stop to consider that? You have something that you are to be about doing right now. And so the question is, where are you engaging those who don't need Jesus? I know that's super simple question, right? But have you ever stopped to think we've become really good at insulating ourselves from people who don't think like us or believe the same things that we do? Are you engaging people who don't know Jesus? Are you engaging them? Or have you so insulated yourself that you've become ineffective in your witness because of it? I had a guy I talked to, and we got to this point in the conversation about do you even engage with people who aren't Christians? He said, you know what, man? He said, my neighbors see me drive, they see me leave my house every Sunday morning and go to church. And that was it for him. He thought that was that's what constituted him engaging lost people, is that they would look out their window and see him go to church every Sunday morning. I'm faithful to go to church every Sunday morning. No. That isn't real. That isn't real relationships. And I know it's scary, and I know it may seem not safe to engage people that don't think and believe like you do, but can I just let you in on can I let you in on a secret that Jesus didn't call you to a safe faith? In fact, people have been willing to die for this for nearly 2,000 years. Man, so including people in your lives that may be a little bit messy is that's hard to reconcile with people who've been dying for this, right, if you have a hard time doing that. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to be, I went way darker than I went in the first service, but second question, how are you being intentional with your time, resources, personality, and giftings? Maybe you are an Ed. Maybe you're an Ed Newton, and God just wired you that way. Are you being faithful to that? Maybe not. Maybe God wired you with a sense of hospitality, and He just gave you the ability to strike up conversations with strangers. Maybe not. Maybe God gave you the ability to cook amazingly. I don't know. Whatever it is, know that God has something for you in a way for you to engage people who don't know Him with that thing. But you have to be engaging people. You can't just sit there. All of a sudden when we start thinking like this, those parables of the unfaithful stewards get real scary, right? Because you begin to realize that God has gifted you and He has entrusted you with things that will further His kingdom. And for you to fail to steward those is a scary, scary thing. Go back and read the parables. How has He gifted you? Time, resources, money, personality, giftings. Whatever it is, how has He gifted you? And are you using those things? I don't know. I don't know how to answer that for you. But I know some ways that we want to help you as a church, to equip you and empower you to do this well this year. In our Vision 2020. And so I want to talk about a few ways that we are going intentionally out into the world this year. And maybe the thought of all this, I have no clue where to begin. That is A-okay, right? That's what we as a church are here for. That's what pastoral staff gets paid for. You realize that pastors don't get paid to write sermons. We get paid to help lead and equip people. And we want to do that way. We want to help lead and equip you to be able to go do this on mission together. And here's how we're going to do it. Acts chapter 1, verse 8 says, "You will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you shall be my witnesses both in Jerusalem and Judea, Samaria, and even to the remotest parts of the earth." And this has been the pattern in these concentric outworking circles, that this is what churches have used for hundreds of years about their process to be intentional about the mission of Jesus. We start at home, and then we move outward in these concentric circles. And so Jerusalem, that's local, that's here, that's home. 401. Mission class. This is, you guys got one of these, right? Everybody get one of these? If you have been to the 101, 201, 301 class, man, February 16th, we are holding our next 401 class. Man, I don't care if it's been a year since you attended your last one. Please sign up for one of these classes. Just write 401 class, and if you need childcare, write childcare on there. But what this class does, and Brother Randy teaches it, and it's awesome class, is it helps you kind of decipher, what is that mission? What is it that God may be calling me to? And then how is our church engaging that mission? How can I partner with what's already happening? Or how can I start something new? How can I do something? Maybe you have something on your heart, in your mind that we don't currently do. We're not currently a part of. But you've really got a burden for this thing. How can we come alongside and help you do that? And that is a really good space to work that out. Next is our kids skills. For 20 years, we held a church camp. It was all hands on deck sort of thing. We put it on. It was a week long. Half the week was teen camp. Half the week was church camp. But what we noticed is we began to be ineffective at reaching people from our community with that. Parents were less and less likely to send their kids to this overnight camp that they didn't know. And so there was a couple of directions we could have went. We could have gotten really upset about that. And it's well, this is a thing we've done forever and we love it, and it's fun and our kids love it. And we could have retooled to just do it for our kids. Or what we chose to do is we stopped and we said, no, we really do want to use this as an opportunity to reach out into our community. And so we came up with Kids Skills. And so we have a camp here at the church over the summer. And they did some amazing things last year. Man, they made these cutting boards in their woodworking class. Actual doing skills. And made these checkerboard oak and walnut cutting boards. And they're gorgeous, man. They did cooking classes and art classes and stuff like that. Because we believe that engaging these kids in the day-to-day stuff of life, just sitting around the kitchen, making something, that opens up more opportunities for conversations in ministry than it does for us to sit down and just talk at some kids, right? Their attention span's about that long. But you put them in a kitchen and you start a dialogue with some students, anybody can cook something, right? Like most people can cook something, right? And so, but there's opportunity out there for you. And so if you're interested, man, and you think like, hey, I've got this skill, I can underwater basket weave, right? Well, you know what? We weren't planning on having an underwater basket weaving class, but if you come and like that's your thing, I would love to see it personally. And then, like, secondly, like, sign up. Let's offer underwater basket weaving this year, right? And so, if that's you and you're interested in that, mark that on your card, and we will be getting with you. Not creepy like, but we'll get with you, right? Judea. Have you guys seen this picture? Yep, that picture.
That's great.
That picture. That's the one. There we go. Have you guys seen that picture? No? Yes, no? So this is from our recent PI partnership. Partners in Education at Horizons Elementary. We pay a certain amount of money every year to kind of have a seat at the table when it comes to talking about ways to help the school, to bless the teachers and the students, ways that we can partner for the good of the school. So missiologists have this thing called a cultural key. In every culture, there is a particular key that opens the door for the gospel to go forward. Right? Now, in the Pacific Northwest, I believe, so is Pastor Bobby, that cultural key, or one of them, is community involvement. There is a stigma around churches that are us four and no more, right? We've closed our doors and we just kind of hang out here. And so other people see us and they say, well, we don't believe what you believe and don't think the way you do. And you're obviously like not making any efforts to be involved in what we do. And so they're not interested in coming or hearing anything that we have to say. And so one of the cultural keys here in the Pacific Northwest is for us to engage our community in ways that aren't overtly evangelistic. But here's what's awesome about these opportunities is you don't know where you're going to meet a student or a teacher or an administrator along that Ingalls scale of evangelism. And since most of it isn't that moment where you walk through the moment of salvation, since 99.9% of it is how you live and how you act and react, like what better way to do that than to put yourself in a position where you actually get to like kind of rub shoulders with those kids and the faculty? Like what if we could be a breath of fresh air in that place? Like you have the opportunity for that. And there are multiple opportunities coming up that you would get with Brother Darcy. I think we have the book bingo coming up. There's actually multiple events coming up in February. And so if you're interested in that, like, man, if you can read a book and you're retired, or if you're you have Tuesdays at 10:30 free or something, like mark that on your card. Like, hey, I want information, PI partnerships. We'll put you on the list. And again, we'll get with you. Not creepy like, but we'll get with you. Surround the Sound. I'm rapidly running out of time. Surround the Sound. Many of you guys know that part of our Judea sort of outreach was to plant 7 churches in the South Puget Sound by 2020. And we're doing pretty good at that. We've actually planted 5 of them. And we're getting ready to plant the next one. Yeah, there you go. That's us out in Yelm. So we wanted to plant a church in Yelm. There isn't a whole lot of stuff happening out here. Well, there's a lot of stuff happening in Yelm, but there's not a lot of good stuff happening in Yelm. Yelm's weird, right? And I can say that because I'm from there. Like, I live out there. Yelm is a strange place. But I've come to love Yelm, like, a lot over the last. I didn't think it was possible to love a city or a place, but I've really come to love that place and the people there. And it is really got a special place in our heart. Now, we chose the name The Outpost because an outpost is the last place you visit before a journey in the wilderness for equipping and training. And it's also the first place you come back to out of the wilderness for rest and for refuge. And so we wanted to be those two things. We wanted to equip people who were faithfully following Jesus to do ministry. However that looks for you. Maybe that looks like something that doesn't happen in a place like this. And I'm so excited for that to be the case because there's not a whole lot of people coming here that don't already know Jesus or aren't already seriously seeking Jesus. And so how can we go into our community and how can we equip people to use their jobs or their businesses or their hobbies even, like for ministry? How can we equip people to do that well? But also, how can we consistently point people back to the hope that is in Jesus, right? The rest and the refuge for our souls in our lives that only Jesus gives. So we want to be both of those things. And if you're interested in that, trust me, I'm interested in that, in having that conversation with you. I actually just had a really great conversation with somebody after church in first service that was like, hey, I live in Yelm, right? And so if you live in Yelm and this time next year you're still driving to like Lacey for church, don't. Right? You're messing up. Don't do that. Right? Like come to church with us. Like we need you, especially if you're from Yum and you're part of that community. We need other people that are part of it. So I would love to have that conversation with you. So if that's you, write down the Outpost on there and I will find you. Right? I will find you. Samaria. We have our destination class, 18 through 28-year-olds that have been meeting here at the church. Awesome ministry, man. That is the one of the most underserved, I would say the second most underserved age group in the church. And it is like one of the most critical periods of time. We have youth ministry, we have all these things, and then we sort of just like release them in one of the most critical points in their life to make some of the biggest decisions that will radically like determine what the rest of your life looks like. And yet there isn't a whole lot in that. Most churches fail to offer anything to that demographic. And churches are realizing that, and they're waking up to that, and Sunbreak has woken up to that, and we're trying to make some headway. Adam and Renee and Kevin and Leanne, everybody, like there's a group of adults here that are walking with young adults. I won't call them students because maybe they're not, maybe they're young career professionals, but walking through people in this stage of life. What does it look like? They're going through a series right now called Adulting, which is funny. I like it. That's great, man, because there's a lot of things that like I figured out on my own because there was nobody there to like help me walk through that stage. But we're doing things differently. And one of the things that group is getting ready to do, July 18th through the 24th, is a mission trip down to Atlanta. They're going to get to see Mark, actually. It's really awesome. And so if you're interested in that and you're in that age group, then write that on your thing and get with Brother Adam. If you're interested in that and you're not in that age group, write that on your bulletin and get with Brother Adam. There are ways in which you can still partner with that. Just because it isn't open for you to go doesn't mean it isn't open for you to still serve that age group and minister to that age group. So please, if you're interested in that, please engage with us. And finally, the ends of the earth. And this is actually super appropriate today. Pastor Bobby is in Romania. He is there with a group of two other people, and they're starting a building project, and not exactly sure all of the details on that, but I actually learned in between services that there may be two more opportunities. I know on the next trip over, there's one open slot, and then there's a third trip with 3 open slots to go. And so there's opportunity for you in that, and if you're interested in that, please let us know. Brother Randy, I think Brad, you can both those guys can direct you on how to get involved in that. And then finally, there's the Tokyo Outreach Bible Project. Used to be the Olympic Bible Project. We're going to be doing the Summer Olympics this year in Tokyo. And Pastor Brad is going to be heading up the trip on that. I think there's actually enough slots for however many you want to go. It just may mean the group gets broken up. But they go to the Olympics, and they're passing out Bibles. That's awesome, in all kinds of different languages and stuff like that. So you get to go to the Olympics and see all the people and the athletes and everything and be a part of that, pass out Bible. So if you're interested in either one of those, to the ends of the earth's mission, like please let us know. Write that on your card and drop it in the back on your way as we leave. All right, so everybody with me? Everybody good? Whew, I know that was a long commercial, and I am not good at commercials. But I think it was an important one because we're doing a lot of stuff this year. And we can do a lot of stuff, or we can set a lot of stuff up to be done, but whether a lot of stuff actually gets done is dependent on you. We are a church, and church is a group of people. And so our church can set up a pie partnership, but if nobody shows up to it, then our church did nothing, right? I know that's like really simplistic, and I'm going back to like really basic things. But like we need you. We need people who are sold out to the fact that you have been called to this task of evangelism. And that looks all kinds of different ways. But we need you to engage, to do, right? So the wrong response to a message like this is to walk out and be like, well, that was a really good sermon, right? That's the wrong, like if you walk out and you do that, that's the wrong response, right? I can't tell you exactly what the right response is, but it has to do with doing something. It has to do with you realizing that man, you have been called to this mission of Jesus to evangelize, to go into all the world and make disciples. And we have given you a number of different ways in which you can do that. You have neighbors and people that like maybe you're not engaging with, but you need to engage with. The wrong response is to do nothing with this, to walk out and say, oh, that was really good. The right response has you doing something, engaging yourself in the mission that we as a church are going after. So I don't know what that looks like for you. I would love to have that conversation, whatever it is. I can probably point you in the right direction, but please, like, don't have the wrong response about this, right? I want to pray, and then I'll be in the back. I would love to have that conversation. Father God, just thank you so very much for your Son. Thank you. Thank you for the goodness, and life, and the hope that we have in Jesus. Father, I pray that you would burden our hearts with sharing that with other people this week, Father. Taking little steps to engage people who don't know you. I just pray that our church would gather around these points of mission this year and that we would actively all go together. Father, let's pray for the workers of the harvest, that you would send workers for this harvest, Father. We love you, Jesus, and we ask all of this in your name.